From tots to young adults in their mid-20s, social interaction supports health and development. Very young children learn about the world and how to interact with others through play. In the teen years, our brains literally rewire themselves according to our social environment, activities and interactions. Over the past 14 months, the young have been denied access to the face-to-face social world that they desperately need. They have been lonely in this crisis, far lonelier than their parents, and that loneliness has dire consequences. This, according to Professor Ellen Townsend from the University of Nottingham, writing for the brilliant Collateral Global website. And Ellen Townsend joins me now. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Mark.
So what motivated you to write this article?
I think over the last year, I've been really worried about the impact of the restrictions that have been put in place to curb the spread of coronavirus. And it's felt to me, and many of my colleagues actually working in psychiatry, in psychology and other fields, that children are being neglected in this crisis and their needs aren't being taken into account. So I've been writing as much as I can to try and raise awareness about this from the evidence base and from what young people are telling us about their experiences.
We focused, haven't we, on the economic consequences of lockdown. We've heard quite a bit about the impact on the mental health of the nation because of lockdown, but very little regard to children and young people.
Yes, and the research has taken place. There's been some really wonderful research coming out of a lot of different universities in this country and overseas, and it's all telling us a fairly similar story, which is that young people are suffering. They're suffering with their mental health, they're suffering with loss of education. The inequalities in that regard were stark before the pandemic. I'm afraid that the gap is getting ever wider the more we're having to impose these restrictions on the lives of our young people.
And the problem is that the impact on very small children, really young children and toddlers, isn't going to be clear for years to come.
I think that's so true. And I felt that we have been doing a mass experiment without really knowing what the consequences are going to be. And what we really need in place now, which many people are calling for, is a kind of recovery curriculum in schools, especially, across the age range, to make sure that we are not only looking after these kind of educational losses that have happened, but all the other social, the creative side of life at school and outside of school that children have missed now for over a year.
Yes, the Mail Plus newspaper are currently saying that 1 in 5 preschoolers, Ellen, their physical development was impaired because they could not run around during lockdown. The Sutton Trust found that 20% of parents with children aged 2 to 4 felt being stuck inside had hindered them physically. In addition, 25% said language development had been affected and 52% said social and emotional skills had been harmed, as you've pertained to in your article.
Well, these are really worrying statistics, and the stories behind those figures are going to be really sad and quite traumatic in many circumstances. If you think about the number of families that live in this country without access to private garden space, and many outside spaces were closed down. We had tape over playing, ground equipment, things were locked up, seats were taken off of swings. I think we'll look back at this phase and when we really understand the low risk of transmission outdoors, as we now do, these spaces must be available to young people for them to, as you say, in the round and enjoy the outside to enhance their well-being.
Does the mask mandate for secondary school pupils as young as 11, does that reflect the contempt with which we have considered the needs of children during this pandemic?
Well, contempt is a strong word, but I really do feel that there's been a neglect of their needs. And I think the last time we spoke, it was about the mask mandate. And it felt to me that it was something that was being put in place not for the benefit of children, because they are so low risk from this virus. And actually it was about protecting adults and not putting children's needs first.
And without compelling data to demonstrate that somehow these face coverings are a game changer in controlling the spread, it was wrong to experiment with children in this way.
I don't understand why pilot studies were not conducted. It would have been very easy to do randomized controlled trials, cluster randomized controlled trials, small size, just to see, to check before we implemented a mass trial on children. And I think the evidence is weak. The government has stated that the evidence is weak in regard to face coverings, and it's become a political hot potato. The evidence is almost out the window now, and people aren't really interested in that. It's about something else now, I think.
So what hope for the future of children? I mean, do you think that any damage that has been inflicted on children by the COVID measures can be reversed, Ellen?
I think there's hope, and we really strongly need hope. We need the government to be very clear and calm in its messaging for children. Children need certainty, they need structure, and they need routine. And when things are always uncertain and we feel like we're on unstable tectonic plates, that's not helpful. The more we can do to reassure children to trust us, because we need to be trustworthy as adults. We need to follow through. When we say we're going to do something, we need to do it. That's kind of basic parenting. And we need to now win back the trust of our young people and support them. And we need resources. We can't expect them to do it by themselves. Schools, communities, I've said this before, grassroots organisations are going to play a huge role in this.
Absolutely. It will take resource. It will take manpower. Are you optimistic that we're through the worst of the COVID measures now, Ellen? Do you think that we will see an unlock in June?
I think the data is looking extremely positive. And I think when we look at the example from states in America that have opened up and got rid of mask mandates and social distancing, I mean, that it's looking incredibly positive. You look at what's happened in Texas and Florida, to follow their example, I think would be extremely sensible.
I can highly recommend this fantastic article. It's in Global Collateral, which is a website there to focus on the impact of lockdowns. Surely there has to be another way under the circumstances of a future pandemic. Ellen, thank you very much for joining us, Professor Ellen Townsend there from the University of Nottingham.